Hi, I'm Sarah Lubetsky. I am the clinical research manager for the Brookdale Department of Geriatrics and Palliative Medicine. And I am here to talk to you right now about setting up databases for primary data collection. So, so sorry. First things first, I just wanted to make a note about the people who use our databases, right? We have front-end users and we have back-end users. Front-end users are the people who are entering the data. Back-end users are the people who are pulling the data out and analyzing it. And really, we need to think about both the front-end user and the back-end user when we're setting up our database, regardless of whether we ourselves are front-end users or back-end users or both. So want to just review a little bit of data speak before we move forward. I have some definitions here. So again, the front end is the actual form that we are entering data into. The back end is essentially a spreadsheet. And it's what your data analyst will see when they export data for analysis. An instrument is a set of questions that we are collecting data on. A synonym for it would really just be a form in most cases. We tend to do one form per instrument. So if you do the Montreal Cognitive Assessment for your study, that assessment is one instrument. If you do a battery of questions about functional status, that is another instrument. If you ever hear us talk about survey items, an item is just one question. Any question, any single variable on your form or in your database is an item. A variable is really a synonym. It's just we are more likely to call it a variable when we are talking about the back end, so the spreadsheet part, and we're more likely to call it an item when we're talking about the front end, the form that we're filling out. So an observation is typically one person, though not necessarily, depending on the situation. It's a row on your spreadsheet, one record. A value is a response option. So for example, if I have a question that has two options, yes or no, yes is a value and no is a value. We have variable names, which are the names assigned to data on the back end, to variables on the back end, that the data analysis software has to be able to read. And yes, and we have variable and value labels, which are, essentially masks, as you see here, put over the variable name so that we know what it really means. So we'll go into this in depth in this presentation. So to review the front end of a database or of a form, we have an example here. We have this neat little survey about lunch. So our instrument is called lunch. Our instrument here has 4 items: whether we ate lunch, what we ate, whether it tasted good, and do we usually eat lunch? So this observation is study ID number 3. So meaning it's person number 3 enrolled in the study. It's just an arbitrary number that we've assigned to the theoretical participant, the hypothetical participant in this database example. And all of these yeses and nos and soup, salad, sandwich, pizza, all of these things, these are different values that our data can take on. And this is what that survey, that same survey, or rather that same instrument looks like on the back end. So we have a number of observations. Before I only showed one observation from the form, but now on the back end, we see there are actually 4 observations, person 1, person 2, person 3, and person 4. We have the same variables, right? So did you eat lunch today? That is here, lunch underscore today is the name of that variable. The actual variable name that a data analyst is seeing on the back end. This checklist of what the person ate, soup, salad, sandwich, or pizza, you see it here. Lunch today, food, and then these are the 4 response options. And that 1, 2, 3, and 4 is automatically populated by REDCap. There is a way to choose though. If you want to get a little bit more in the weeds. We have an other category. Was your lunch good? And yeah, just every one of these variables is tracking with or paired with a question that is on the form, I guess is the major point that I want to make here. And everything that we see entered into the form, all these 1s and 0s and things like that, these are the values that I was talking about earlier. Even our free text response here, ice cream is technically a value. Anything that we enter into the form. What it looks like on the back end is a value. So I want to talk a little bit about variable naming. So I have strong preferences about this. I realize that to a certain extent, it's arbitrary because the name of your variable doesn't affect your analysis. However, just for data management purposes, it's always useful for variable names to reflect the structure of your database. So the way I like to do things personally is for every form or instrument, I like to use that instrument name or an abbreviation of it as a stem for every variable on the form. This is with the exception of demographics. So if you have a demographics form, I think great to just leave the variables as, age, sex, race, ethnicity, income, what have you. But for anything that is not a demographics form, yeah, I think it's a generally good practice to use the instrument name in your variable name as the opening stem. I like to put an underscore after, and then just a short word that describes the question well. So did you eat breakfast today? We're calling this breakfast underscore today. And we have some questions here that only pop up if you did have breakfast today. And when that happens, I think it's a generally good practice to continue reflecting the structure of the database. These two questions that are branched under breakfast today start with breakfast today. So what did you eat? We named this breakfast today food because we're describing the foods that that person ate. And was it good? I just used the word good. So again, good to keep it relatively brief, and good to reflect the structure of the database. So just making a similar point here about branching logic and variable naming when we have questions that only appear if you respond in a certain way. Good to use underscores and variable naming to reflect that branching logic structure. Just give you a moment to look at how this was designed, right? So we ask the first question, as you saw on the prior slide. If the person says yes, then we ask these questions. Yeah, and then also want to talk a little bit about value naming, or coding values of particular variables, is probably the better way to put it. So I also think as a general data management practice that it's good to give values as much meaning as humanly possible. So if you have a standardized instrument and your standardized instrument says in the instructions to code things a certain way, so you know that this answer is a 1 and this answer is a 2 and this answer is a 3, then just do it the way it was set up in the standardized instrument. Also because oftentimes there can be scoring implications. A lot of these forms are designed, or a lot of these instruments are designed to give a person 2 points if they answer option number 2 and 3 points if they answer option number 3, for example. So definitely stick with what the instrument says if you have an instrument that is set up that way, that is standardized with pre-assigned values. That being said, if you have an instrument, or rather if you are setting something up in REDCap that is not standardized in that way, then these are my suggestions for how to code things. So anything that is a yes/no question, no should always be 0 and 1 should always be yes. And if you have ordinal data, meaning that the response options, that the order of the response options has meaning. So never, sometimes, always is a really good example of this. That would be one direction, or ordinal data in 2 directions, such as we see with this 5-point Likert scale: strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. It wouldn't make sense to change the order of these things because the order has meaning, right? So this is how I like to set it up. I like to anchor the scale on a 0 if there is either a neutral option or an option that resembles a no. If such an option does not exist, then I usually set it up so that 0 doesn't exist. So this ordinal scale in one direction, if there was no never option, I would just start with 1. And similarly, if this was a 4-point Likert scale, so if we didn't have this neutral option here, it was just strongly disagree, disagree, agree, and strongly agree, then I would just go -2, -1, 1, and 2. Really, I think for ordinal data that work in 2 directions, it's really always best to reserve 0 for the neutral option. And here, negative numbers and positive numbers have meaning. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was nominal data, which are data in which the order has no meaning. So it doesn't matter if this goes apple, banana, pear, mango, or if it goes mango, banana, pear, apple. The order is meaningless. And for data like those, I tend to just use counting numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4 for however many options you have. I also want to talk about what to do with non-response options. So if someone doesn't pick one of the the preset selections because they don't know the answer, because they don't want to answer the question, they feel it's not applicable to them, or they have some other answer that isn't listed. I think it's a generally good practice, beneficial to your data analyst, to use the same codes every time. So me, in my history as a data analyst, these were the codes that I like to use. That being said, they're not the only codes you can use, and you should really talk to your data analyst for your study, assuming you have one, to see if they have any preferred missing data codes, because it's going to make life much, much easier for them. You know, they have to sit there with a data dictionary for every single variable and look up every single thing. If you're not using the same codes for other refuse, don't know, and not applicable. But if you use the same codes every time, you make their job a lot easier. They don't need to look it up. They can just remember. And it can be easy for you to include non-response codes. So what I like to do is use this additional customizations function in REDCap, or rather I should call it a feature, to preset your missing data codes. So the refused, the don't know or unknown, and the not applicable. Of course, there are other types of missing data codes. You should use the ones that are applicable to your study, but these are the ones that come up most often, at least in my work. So as you are going through your form, you remember this question about what the person ate. You'll notice this little M next to the question in the form, and that M stands for missing. So if you need to use a missing data code because a participant didn't want to answer the question or didn't like the options, then you would click the M, and assuming that you had set up the missing data codes using the additional customizations feature of REDCap, you would click the M and you would just select the applicable code. In this case, it was other. This is probably the person who ate ice cream. And yeah, and then it will appear on your form, plain and simple. So I also want to talk about what we call longitudinal data. So data where we have multiple observations per patient, potentially multiple rows per patient participating in the study. And the way we would set this up in REDCap really depends on whether we know in advance how many observations or rows there will be for that person of that particular variable or of that particular form. So if we know in advance that we're going to have to ask this question at 3 separate time points. For example, I don't know, we are asking about functional status at baseline, and then on a 6-month interview, and then on a 12-month interview. Then we're going to use a feature in REDCap called longitudinal data collection with defined events. And we will set up one event that is baseline, one event that is the 6-month interview, and one event that is the 12-month interview. And if we do not know the number of repeat observations in advance, then we use something called repeatable instruments. And both of these can be enabled as you are setting up your project. So first, talking about the events feature in the example that I gave, yeah, there was in fact a baseline 6-month and 12-month assessment. And this is what it looks like after we have enabled longitudinal data collection with defined events. Defined meaning we know them and we can tell you what they are in advance. So this way you don't have to build the same form multiple times. You can just say, I would like this form to appear at baseline, 6-month and 12-month. And some forms we only use once. So then you just enable it when it's supposed to be used. And then this is what things look like when we're using the repeatable instruments feature. You'll see that we can add a new round, a new form for that thing, whatever that thing is, just by clicking add new for that particular form. And then we just fill it out as many times as we need to fill it out. And that's about it for this little data management presentation. I'm wondering if you have any questions.
No, I think that was very clear. The variable naming made a lot of sense. So no questions for now. Thanks.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining our presentation today, and enjoy the rest of your day.